one he passes goes.
You cut Meals on Wheels? Healthcare?
Yes.
NEA? Pussycat?
Tiny hands.
Oh, and I watch him so madly. How can I tell him I loathe him? Yes, while he's dining on lobster, and Melania stays in NYC, the bill comes not to him but me. How much money is he making from presidential golf vacationing at his own Mar-a-Lago by the sea? Oh, is he running the country? How can I tell if he's working? Yes, I would vote to impeach him. But each day when I walk to D.C., I can't find him. He's at the sea. If he works, no one will ever know. 'Cause he's holed up in Mar-a-Lago, laughing at his own government money tree.
Yo, what up, guys?
He's living free and charging me
Spray tan gobshite?
down. Down by the sea.
Nationalism does nothing but teach you how to hate people that you never met. And all of a sudden you take pride in accomplishments you had no part in whatsoever, and you brag about, you know, and the Americans go, fuck the French! Fuck the French. If we hadn't have saved their ass in 2 world wars, they'd be speaking German right now. You go, oh, was that us? That was us? Was that me and you, Tommy? We saved the French? Jesus. I know I blacked out a little bit after that 4th shot of Jägermeister last night, but I don't remember. I know we went through the Wendy's drive-thru. We were going to get one of the fresh center sandwiches. It looked so alluring on the commercial, but then we ordered it and realized we had no money, and we had to ditch out before the second window. And those douchebags in line behind us with the bass music probably got our order, and we laughed about that. But I don't remember saving the French. I went through the last 10 calls on my cell phone, and there's nothing incoming or outgoing to the French looking for muscle on a project. I checked my...
Yo, this dude is funny as shit. I just listened to that motherfucker. Live in PA. Yeah, they're doing some weird ass shit with our tolls. Now it's like there aren't any, some toll booths don't even have tickets or anything. You just get a fucking bill in the mail. And so they kind of force you to get this little turnpike shit. This easy pass. I'm so pissed off PA is making people do this. And it's like, well, we can send you a bill every time, and you have to go online every time, and fill out the process to pay your due. Or you can get the easy pass, and it's easy, and all you gotta do is drive through. I don't even know where to put this shit at. What the? You just have it in your car anywhere. Just like, I don't know. I don't even know what to do with this motherfucker. I gotta read instructions on this shit, man. Nationalism is dumb. It just teaches us how to hate people we don't even know. Makes us relate to shit we had nothing to do with. If we didn't save the French in 2 world wars, they'd be speaking German right about now. Oh, was that us? Did we save the French?
Pants has no mud state. Nationalism does nothing but teach you how to hate people that you never met, and all of a sudden you take pride in accomplishments you had no part in whatsoever, and you brag about, you know, and the Americans would go, fuck the French. Fuck the French. If we hadn't have saved their ass in 2 world wars, they'd be speaking German right now. We go, oh, was that us? That was us? Was that me and you, Tommy? We saved the French? Jesus. I know I blacked out a little bit after that 4th shot of Jägermeister last night, but I don't remember. I know we went through the Wendy's drive-thru. We were going to get one of them fresh cheddar sandwiches. It looked so alluring on the commercial, but then we ordered it and realized we had no money, and we had to ditch out before the second window. And those douchebags in line behind us with the bass music probably got our order.
I'm trying.
We laughed about that, but I don't remember saving the French. I went through the last 10 calls on my cell phone, and there's nothing incoming or outgoing to the...
So it's your phones, it's your the chips in your credit cards, it's your vehicles. Man, these motherfuckers know where you at 24 hours a day. You're not getting away from them. You are officially tracked. They put a tracker on you, man.
Check my pants. There's no mud stains on the knees from where we were garroting Krauts in the trenches at Verdun. I think we didn't do anything but watch sports bloopers while we got hammered. I think we should shut the fuck up. All that stuff. Tradition and heritage, it's dead people's baggage.
It's dead people's
Quit
baggage.
carrying it. Did you make it up? No. It's passed on to me. Pass it back. Every immigration argument that you hear, they never come from a, like, well, how does it affect you personally? Well, you know, these immigrants, they come to our country, they burden our tax system. What they do is they come here and they get into our education system and our health care, and I'm going to pay the taxes. My taxes have to pay that. Well, what the fuck are you doing to me? Every time you have a kid, because it's American, I should pull up a chaise lounge and wave a flag while 15 of those things come out of you, pay everyone. Oh, I can't wait to pay for these. They're American. I have a vasectomy and an abortion on my record, but I can't wait for all your fucking fat-headed Midwestern kids to come out of here. What are you, Catholic? Come on, people for a multiply. Love it, love it. I'll get a second job. No, keep... Well, these immigrants, they don't speak the language. Then don't talk to them. And I solved your problem. That was quick. You know who speaks the language perfectly? Your next door neighbor. You've lived there 8.5 years. You've never said one fucking word to that guy. You avert eye contact should you check the mail at the same time. So why would you give a shit with the guy selling Ganipganovs in a cart in a park speech? It's none of your fucking business. And all the cliched arguments like that, well, they're lazy, they're shiftless, they're criminals, and all this. All those arguments go against the main cliched argument of they're taking American jobs. I live on the Mexican border. I live 7 miles off the Mexican border in a town, Bisbee, Arizona, a little town.
I came at one of my foremen on my job with the exact same motherfucking conundrum. He's trying to write me up for being on my phone. He says I'm reading a book all day or I'm on my phone all day long. That's all Travis does. He's always on his fucking phone. He's always reading some shit. But then he says, I said, well, then why don't you ever come and get somebody to give me assistance when I'm at the bottom of the line. Oh well, you're one of the best workers. You're one of the hardest workers, and you don't need a lot of help. You can run both machines by yourself, and you don't really need much assistance. So I'm one of the better workers. I'm a hard ass worker. I can run both lines by myself. And the reason you don't give me assistance is because I don't need assistance, because I'm able to handle my duties and my task. And I'm on my phone and I'm reading all day. Which one is it? Which one is it? Am I reading and I'm on my phone all day, or am I just one of the best workers who can handle the whole workload? You can't have it both ways, dude. I can't be the best at what I do and don't need help at the same time being on my phone all day and reading all day. You can't do it both ways. Motherfucker just try to blow everything out of proportion. Like he's trying to make the correlation between oh, they're lazy, they're thieves, they're criminals, they're rapists, but they're taking all our jobs. Wait, so you're telling me motherfucker is a non-English speaking criminal but he took your job? I was so excited when he started explaining this point, because that shit never made any sense to me, and especially when Trump started calling them rapists and criminals. But dude, all these motherfuckers come here and work. They not coming over here starting some motherfucking pedophile underground ring where they're sex trafficking motherfuckers. They come get jobs. Golden rule looking ass. Do unto others as you would have others do unto you.
I can go out any day and watch Border Patrol arresting these guys by the dozen, 11 at a time, out of a Dodge Omni, like a clown car with plastic cuffs. And you're right, they don't speak the language, and they probably have no education. They don't have fucking shoes half the time. They're like barefoot and tattered castaway, like Gilligan's Island shorts, and like a dirty t-shirt, and they're dehydrated and wander in a desert for 4 days. And if that guy is as qualified for your job as you are, you're a fucking loser of such epic, humiliating proportions. I would be ashamed to have anyone find out that guy took my job. He doesn't speak English. What, did they do your job training in pantomime, shithead? Oh, see, good. Boy, boy, I see. Boy, boy. Great. You're out of here, mullethead.
You're out of here, mullethead.
Asshole, you should have tried harder. Nobody bitches about immigrants taking their job if that person has skills of any level.
Oh, that is the golden rule.
Not a fucking brain surgeon sitting around the Beverly Hills Hotel lounge. You know what really chaps my ass, Barry? Scandinavian fella.
That's he with the gold makes the rules. Just like his story. He who conquers tells his story. I'll tell it the way I want to tell it. They were all savages. They came at us with spears, screaming la 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 la. So I shot them down, and I converted them to Christians.
They're coming over taking all our good neurosurgery positions. The Norwegians specifically. I said we down ourselves a bottle of Jack Daniels and go stomp us some Ouija ass. The first Ouija we see. Jump out of that Explorer and pound him. Fucking immigrants. All started with that Einstein. Once they brought him over from Germany and we didn't have any good genius jobs, it was a trickle-down effect.
So it started with that Einstein. Once they brought him over from Germany, we ain't had no more genius jobs. It was a trickle-down effect. Man, I need to blow my fucking nose.
HBO presents One Night Stand with comedian Bill Burr. Ladies and gentlemen, Bill Burr.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Thanks a lot. Thank you so much. Thank you. For Christ's sake. Thank you.
Shit, a little motherfucker with some goddamn with some chip shades riding a big wheel. I ain't gonna question your authority either. Don't question my authority. I am the law.
Thanks a lot. I'm running out of ways to say thank you. For Christ's sake. How's it going? Excellent. I was in a shitty mood today, man. I was watching TV. You ever been in like such a bad mood that even when you're watching bad shit happening to people, you're like, you know what? Good.
Ooh, shit.
You know, I'm glad your life sucks. Makes me feel better about my own. No, you know what I was doing? I was watching this, you know those Fabulous Lives? I was watching the Fabulous Life of the Olsen twins, you know? They're like 18 years old, they're like zillionaires. We got a great apartment. It's making me feel like a loser. Then halfway through it, I find out one of them's anorexic. I was like, you know what? All right. That makes me feel better. You know, I'm glad she's not eating. Hope you pass out, whack your head off your golden sink. Just to add to my day. You know, I don't get how the other Olsen twin only weighs half a pound more, but she's fucking fine. No, they're so starving, they're weak. That's why whenever they take a picture of them, you ever notice they gotta like fucking lean them up against each other? So like they don't tip over, like they're like still trying to look sexy. They're not sexy, they look like aliens. They are, man, you can't weigh 42 pounds and have your eyeballs be 28 of that weight and not look like you're from outer space. Like, when I look at them, I think if E.T. was going to have a threesome, those are the two bitches he'd hook up with. He would, he'd get that glowing finger going. Now, I feel like a loser, man. Hey, man, I'm fucking 36, I'm not married, you know? I'm at that age where everybody I know is getting married. You know, let me ask you a question. Why the hell do people keep getting married? You know, isn't anybody looking at the stats? What's it like? 1 out of 2 marriages goes right down the shitter? People, if you were going skydiving and they told you half the parachutes weren't going to open, you'd be like, yo, fuck that, I'm not going.
I see it right here.
Yeah. No, it's like, I don't like those odds. I get a 50% chance of splatting on the ground. I'm not doing it, right? But there's something about getting married. People just have to do it. They're just like, is this the line to lose half my shit? Awesome!
Awesome.
This is gonna be great! I can't wait to lose my car, my money. Oh, look, the line's moving. One step closer to my own personal hell. I don't think I could ever get married, man. Married dudes freak me out. Anytime you ask a married guy, what's it like being married, they always tell you it's good, but they always have a look on their face like they have like an appendicitis. You ever notice that? You're like, dude, what's it like being married? Like, you know, it's good. It's good. It's, no, it's good. It's enjoyable, you know. It's a lot of work, but, you know, I think when you meet that special someone, There's a connection, and I can't feel my legs. Let me just lean over here. You know, a woman completes a man, and some other metaphor. No, you know what freaks me out too, really? When you go to a man's house, there's nothing in there. A married guy's house. When you walk in there, there's nothing in there that even suggests a man even lives there. It's all potpourri and throw pillows. That stupid canopy, we live in a dollhouse bullshit over the bed. Where does all the guy's stuff go? They just throw it out, they just walk into your apartment. Oh my God, look at all your stuff. All your stuff is stupid. Look at all this stupid stuff. Wow, guys buy really stupid stuff. Hey, you want to go to the candle store? Let's go to the candle store. Wouldn't that be awesome? I've been dragged into that nightmare for like an hour and a half. 90 minutes just sitting there. This smells like a pumpkin. Doesn't that smell like a pumpkin? This looks like a Christmas tree. Wouldn't that be great? Smell like Christmas in the apartment? Middle of summer, just fuck with your whole reality? No, you know what it is? I didn't have like a really good model necessarily, like growing up. Like watching my parents, they always used to argue and shit, you know? Like I was afraid of my dad when I was growing up, you know? Anybody have a dad like that? You're just afraid of him? You know? Not like those sitcom dads that come home, the kids are like hugging their legs. My dad pulls in the driveway. Me and my brothers freak like, fucking Dad's home. Shut off the TV. Try to hide. Dude, if I stand like this, do I look like a lamp? He won't see me, right? Can I just fucking chill out here? He wasn't understanding. When you fucked up, he told you. He didn't sit down, well, we're gonna work it out. We'll just, you know, I still love you. He loved you. What the fuck is wrong with you? Jesus Christ, you're an idiot. Weren't you even paying attention? No, bullshit! Christ, you're just like your mother. You're fucking out to lunch. That was my dad. No matter what he was bitching about, somehow he would make it about my mother. It would have nothing to do with her. Nothing to do with her. He could somehow find a connection and spin it back. He'd be saying, oh, is it raining out? Oh, for Christ's sake, I don't need this shit. Christ, it's the same goddamn thing with your mother. That woman is a fucking cloud hanging over my life. Anytime you got an idea, Christ, she shits all over it. No, he was hilarious. He used to work all the time, so he didn't really have like any friends or anything. So he used to talk to me when I was 8 years old like I was a fucking bartender. Just dumping all this shit on me. Like playing in the sandbox, he'd be coming up. I'll tell you, I don't know what the fuck I ever got married for. I'll tell you, man, I'm gonna get the fuck out. I swear to God, one of these days, I'm gonna get in the car, I'm gonna fucking drive out of here. Your mother's a bitch, Billy. Do you realize that? The woman is a fucking bitch. Is that too real for you guys? You fucking know what I'm talking about. I will get married, you know. I was making that. I'll definitely get married someday, you know. I love women and everything. I'm just finding I'm not, like, compatible with them. You know what I mean? You ever just feel that? Like, women have, like, too much energy for me. You know what I mean? Like, you can't have a day off when you have a girlfriend. You ever notice that? It's almost like they see that open day. They're like, oh, my God, let's go fill it up with shit. No, then they just come at you with one horrible idea after another. Horrible ideas. Like, you want to make some sandwiches and go to the park? You want to go to the Container Store, get some containers for your t-shirts? This is the worst one. You ever get this one? You want to go to brunch? You want to go to brunch on Sunday? And inside you're like, fucking no! But you can't say that, right? You gotta keep them happy. So what do? You agree. Like, yeah, let's go to brunch. What a great idea. Why would you want to sleep in on a Sunday when you can go pay $18 for eggs? Now you're thinking. Now you're thinking. Then we can sit around and listen to your friends have moronic conversations about the eggs. Like, is that pesto? Is that pesto in your omelet? Oh, it's asparagus. It's asparagus. I thought it was pesto. Oh, you just want to flip the whole fucking table over? It's horrendous. I'm trying to learn to pick my battles when I date girls. I usually argue with women all the time, man. I'm stupid like that. You know? Like, I dated this girl one time. She was, like, really into, like, women's issues. So we used to always have these dumbass arguments. So one time she came up to me and she goes, okay, explain this to me, Bo. Why does a guy make more an hour to do the exact same job, huh? I go, I'll tell you why. Because in the unlikely event that we're both on a Titanic and it starts to sink, for some fucked up reason, you get to leave with the kids and I have to stay. Yeah, that's why I get the $1 more an hour. No, think about it. If there's a house fire, it's always women and children first. I gotta stand there with like the back of my shirt on fire going, let's go, people, let's go, let's go! So that's how I look at it. No, it's a $1 an hour surcharge. That if something fucked up happens, either I can't leave or I gotta like get in the way of it to give you a head start, like rabid dog, run honey, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. You hear a bump in the night, I gotta go check it out, like, yes, he does have a knife. Anytime there's a hostage situation, who do they negotiate for first? Well, at least let the women and children go. Well, what about me? Bullets hurt me too. Why the fuck do I gotta stay in the vault? No, that's my point, man. Where are all the feminists in those situations? You know what I mean? You can't find them. There are no feminists in a house fire. That's a guarantee. You can take the most hardcore feminist, some chick right in your face, like, you chauvinistic son of a bitch, little short, little haircut, the whole 9 yards, right? Second those flames break out, she's gonna twist those little hairs into pigtails. No, I'm just a girl. I want to go play jump rope. And leave you standing in a burning house like you're not flammable. You know, but I'm not a dick, though. I'm not saying I think a woman should make $1 less an hour to do the same job. All I'm saying is if you're gonna make what I make when the boat sinks, you better be standing right there next to me, listen to that guy play the cello. Then you get the corner office. You get all the benefits or whatever. So anyways, I was watching George Bush today, man. That guy scares the shit out of me. No, not because like, oh, you know, all that political stuff. He's just like too into Jesus for me. I get uncomfortable with that. When people get like overly religious, it kind of freaks me out, you know? You know what I mean? Like I don't mind when like black people get really into Jesus though, you know? Because like somehow like the shit stays spiritual. You know, you get a couple of good songs out of it. You know what I mean? People look like they're having a good time. Somehow when like white dudes get too into Jesus, all of a sudden like shit catches on fire. People start dying, somebody says they're Jesus, and they try to fuck every chick in the compound. Then the FBI's got the place surrounded, that tank comes in shooting the flames out the front. And I'm not saying white dudes are any more crazier than black dudes, it's just that nobody's watching us. That's the problem. That's too much freedom. It's kind of like living alone, you know, that same kind of fucked up freedom. You ever feel when you live alone, you like slowly go crazy? You know, because you got too much freedom, because everybody does crazy shit. But when you live alone and start doing something crazy, there's nobody there to be like, dude, what the fuck are you doing? What is wrong with you? What is that? Put it down. My girl's actually, she's really like religious. She goes to church every week, and I never go, and it freaks her out. She's like, why don't you go to church? You don't believe in God and heaven and hell and all that stuff? Why don't you go? And it's not because I don't believe in a higher power. I definitely do. My thing is when I go to church, I can't get past the fact that I'm just listening to some fucking guy. You ever think of that shit when you go in there? That's just some dude. And people are like, no, that's a special guy. No, it isn't. It isn't. He didn't like levitate down from the ceiling like, ah, this white light around him. Why would you listen to another human being tell you where you're gonna go when you die? It's just like, dude, have you ever been dead? No. Great. So wouldn't it be safe to assume that you wouldn't have the slightest fucking idea what you're talking about? You're making the shit up. You're not fooling me with the robes and the candles. Speaking in old English. He said it under you. Shut the fuck up. You don't talk like that. You're just some guy. Your name's Jerry. You play soccer. You got your ass kicked in gym class. And now you're doing this.
Named Gary. Play soccer. Oh my
Acting
God.
like you're special. I can't do it. I can't get past that fact. I'm sitting in church. This guy's name's fucking Cliff. He's fucking bored. And just break the guy down, and then I can't listen. It's like, you go in there, you listen to another human being tell you what to eat and when to eat it. Don't eat meat this Friday. If you eat meat this Friday, you are going to hell. It's like, dude, I'm going to a cookout on Friday. If you eat that fucking cheeseburger, buddy, that is it for you. Who is this guy? Dude, I'll eat a cheeseburger whenever I want to. And I'll jerk off. It's my dick. Why am I listening to this guy? I'll fucking jerk off while I eat a cheeseburger. What do you think about that? I'm not hurting anybody. Why would God care? I'm not hurting anybody. Think about it. You eat a cheeseburger, that's protein. That's good for your muscles, right? And I don't know about you guys, but after I rub one out, I'm more relaxed. I'm less likely to lash out at my fellow man. I'm in a great space mentally. I don't have any road rage. I talk to telemarketers. I'm buying the shit. I think they just make it all up. But it's weird though, because I'm kind of feeling this thing, because I haven't been to church in a while. I'm kind of feeling like, I want to go back, but I need a new religion, man. That's why I'm kind of between religions right now. Like I used to be Catholic, but I can't be Catholic anymore, once they started fucking the kids, I was just like, all right, dude, you know what? I'm out, okay? You guys party way too fucking hard for me, okay? I got off at about 22 exits ago. I didn't see that page in the book. I don't know what you guys are doing. I can't believe they're still in business. People are still showing up. Name one other business that could survive that shit. You think if they were fucking kids at Walmart, they could sell rakes the next day? You just try to play it off like, yeah, we had a little problem in aisle 8, but we got some slacks over here. We got kitchen appliances. We got some hula hoops. You guys saw the Pope die? You saw that, right? Yeah. Everyone was slipping out, man. I thought that was a good thing. I was like happy for him, man. He was in horrible health. You know what I mean? Everybody just wanted the guy to keep hanging on. It's ridiculous. They're like wheeling him from room to room, and people are still flipping. Oh, God, I think he's gonna die. I think he's gonna die. It's like, well, I think he's gonna go to heaven. I mean, it's got to be better than that shit. I bet the last 2 months of his life, he was just sitting in that chair going, God, I wish the world would stop praying for me. Just fucking let me go. Good Lord. I skied till I was 78. I had a great life. Move on. So they got a new pope now. They picked another old white dude, And they were actually in the running was this black dude from Nigeria, right? They were actually considering making him the pope. And I was kind of hoping he was going to win, Not because I give a fuck either way. I just wanted to see all the black comics doing bits like the next day, like, oh, white people scared now. White people is scared now. Yeah, the Pope is black and shit. It's gonna be a whole different story. He's gonna come in with the hat to the side. Music's gonna be pumping. White people in the front row, gee, I don't know what the fuck's going on. Because when black people go to church, could you just feel it? That was like a half-hour material that went out the fucking window the second they picked another white dude. It was endless. Pope Mobile's gonna be pimped out, and you better not be shooting at this Pope. The black Pope will be shooting back at your ass. Because when white people get shot, etc., etc. Actually, I had this black dude moved in my building, man. Lives on the same floor as me. He's one of these dudes. Every time he's hilarious. Every time he says some shit, right after he's done saying the shit, he repeats like the most important part of like the previous sentence. It's hilarious. Everything he said will be like, yo, my man came in, he put that shit on the table. Put it on the table! It's hilarious. Everything he said. Yo, this country's at war, son. War! I'm just looking at my friend like, dude, did you hear him the first time? Because I heard him the first time. I was smiling, I was nodding. Am I fucking supposed to do that? I mean, what am I supposed to do? Actually, I got a couple friends of African persuasion. And I gotta get rid of them, man. I gotta admit to you. I'm finding I'm spending too much money on clothes hanging out with them. Because I gotta, like, fucking try to keep up with their wardrobe. It's like every time they go out, they got all brand new shit on. All brand new shit. So when I show up with my white version of brand new, which is, you know, I ironed the shit, right? I ironed it, right? It's new. They just start trashing me. I can't keep up with them, man. They got like fucking 58 pairs of sneakers. Ever noticed that shit? Like every color fucking Timberland? And I don't give a shit what fucked up color their shirt is. They got a pair of shoes to match it and a hat. It's like a rule or something. They're the worst. Even when you wear some new shit, there's like some sort of rule that you gotta like space out the amount of time within which like that you wear it. Because God forbid you wear the same shirt within a 10-day period, one of them's gonna notice. All of a sudden just look at you funny like, this motherfucker's got the same shit he had on last Tuesday. And then the whole crowd's like, oh shit! Then everybody just starts making fun of your fucking clothes. First they do the math, like, what was that, 5 days ago? 5 days? This motherfucker got 5 shirts! He got 5 shirts! And they start breaking it down. Yo, his first shirt be saying Monday, next shirt be saying Tuesday. Yo, on the weekend, he ain't be wearing no shirt.
Oh, damn.
I'll tell you, it's actually funny. You know what? That's actually how I judge black guys now. When I first came to the city, like, all black people scared me. No, I was like the typical white dude from like the suburbs, you know what I mean? Had no frame of reference, you know? So my only frame of reference with black people was like, remember those early 90s gangster rap videos? Throw the fucking LA riots in there, man. It was fucking horrible PR. I'm watching the videos, look, he's got nice cars, he's got all the women, and he's still fucking mad. These black dudes are never happy. But after 10 years of living in the city, this is how I narrow it down. Whether a black dude scares me or not. Black dudes with dirty sneakers scare the fucking shit out of me. No. I figured out in my head, because I know from hanging out with them, that's the last shit that they're gonna let go. The immediate shit that they have on. So I think, you know, if his sneakers are fucked up, that means his life is fucked up. Every time he leaves his building, the whole neighborhood, oh, shit! Everyone starts making fun of him. He's on the train in a bad mood. I kind of have this howdy-doody, kind of mug me kind of face. I'm not saying something's going to happen. I'm just saying. I'm paying attention. So I've been seeing this girl recently. This black girl, right? She lives up in Harlem, you know. Gone out like 3-4 times, you know. First time we hung out like the Village area in New York, you know, which is sort of like a racially mixed area. So shit was cool, you know what I mean? Second time we hung out was more like Midtown, you know. Then the third time, she called me at like 3:30 in the morning, and she wanted me to come up to her apartment, right? So it's 3:30 in the morning, she lives in Harlem, I look how I look, so it's a fucking situation. Yeah, because you know the deal, right? Basically, a white dude feels comfortable up to about like 98th, 99th Street, you know what I'm saying? The second the streets start getting to like triple digits, like 100, 101st Street, start getting like a little asthma, like, oh, fuck, it's starting to get a little high up here. You feel that little tightness in your chest? Can you feel that? 106th Street, you're like leaning on shit like, dude, where'd all the cabs go? How come there's no taxis up here? Dude, what's a bodega? I don't know what that is. Let's get the fuck out of here.
What's the bodega? Oh, shit.
So I'm praying to God she's going to tell me to take the subway, get off at like 105th Street, 103rd, you know, which is like the first stop in Harlem where I can still look over my shoulder and see like all the white people like disappearing over the horizon, you know? But she goes, no, man, you want to get on the Uptown 2-3 train, you want to get off at 125th Street. I'm like, ah, fuck, 125th Street. Jesus Christ, that's like right in the middle of everything. I'm going to be surrounded on all 4 sides. I can't fucking do this. So, at this point, I'm really trying to hide, like, the bitchy tone that's starting to creep into my voice, you know? And I'm trying to ask for really specific directions for when I get up there, because I want to know exactly where I'm going. So she starts naming the streets I have to go down, and every other street up there is named after, like, a black leader, you know? She's like, make a left on Adam Clayton, take a right on Frederick Douglass. I'm like, God, fuck Adam Clayton. Yo, dude, go on the internet, look up Adam Clayton. Did he kill a bunch of white people during the slave revolt? Dude, I ain't going up there till I know what Adam Clayton did. Fuck this shit.
Nah, Adam Clayton was a city
So at this
councilman.
point, I'm really having a battle with myself. Because I'm thinking I can't do this, right? I'm like, I can't do this, but my dick's going, no, come on, man, we can do this, all right?
It's cool he knows who Adam Clayton is.
Just relax. Pull yourselves together and get on the goddamn train, right? So as always, I listen to my dick. Oh yeah, I get on the train. By the time I get up there, it's like 5 or 4 in the morning, right? I'm staying on like Malcolm X and like Danny Glover. Or some shit, right? I don't even know where the hell I'm at. When I see the street I want to go up, I want to go up St. Nick. I can literally see her apartment building, but there's like 5 or 6 black dudes standing right on the corner, right where I want to walk by. So I'm like, fuck! Felt like I was on like some reality show at that point, like some sort of like white guy survivor. It was ridiculous. So I'm thinking, I gotta walk right by these guys, right? You know what's funny? I think that they were actually more surprised to see me than I was scared, you know? And I was really, really scared, you know, but I'm also really, really white, you know? Like shockingly Caucasian. You know what I mean? Like if you're not ready for me, I can like surprise you. No, especially if you live up there. You're probably seeing a white person for hours, possibly days. So when I show up, it's almost like magical. Like a leprechaun came out of nowhere, you know? I feel like I should have like a little pot of gold, like a rainbow behind me. Top of the morning till you liked it. Just kind of dance my way past them. But it's been going all right, you know? Once I get in her apartment, I'm fine, you know? I relax. Sit down, you know, watch a hip-hop countdown.
Damn.
Pretend like I know the groups, you know what I mean? It's just getting there that's a fucking pain in the ass. But, you know, I don't get mad at it, because I figure, you know, black dudes gotta go through the same shit, though, right? When you go out to the suburbs, go fuck a white girl. Right? Just that same awful feeling of just leaving your people behind, you know, just less and less of you as you're fucking driving out there. Probably start off lean and you're all fucking cool. 20 minutes in, you're driving like 10 and 2. The radio's off. Like, dude, I don't like this shit. I don't like this shit at all. There's too much grass. I don't see any rims. This is fucked up. None of the windows are tinted. I can clearly see white people in every car. This is fucked up. Listen, you guys were awesome. Thank you so much for coming out. God bless you. Thank you very much. All right, man. Take care. Thank you.
I try so hard. Boom, and we're live, Hamilton Morris. Sober as fuck. How about you?
Absolutely sober.
Yes, this time. So we did a podcast 7 years ago, and most people apparently didn't know how fucked up we were. But I figured, damn, we're here with Hamilton Morris. We should go deep. And we just kept hitting that joint till I lost most of my grasp on reality while we're talking. It was just a very slippery conversation. I was just too high to form coherent thoughts. It was just whatever I pieced together was just, it was almost like miming a conversation.
But now 7 years later, you have a new place.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, well, you were, in the early days, we did it at my house.
Yeah.
That was way, way, way back in the day.
I had no idea, really. I knew who you were, of course, but I didn't know about your podcast entirely. I'd seen clips of you on YouTube, and it wasn't until I was driving home from that recording and my phone just filled with hundreds of emails that I realized, oh wow, this is a serious phenomenon that I was not aware of. and now I see it's just become huge.
It's a weird thing, dude. It's got the wheel. I just sort of have to show up. It's a very strange, and it sounds like false modesty or something like that, but I'm just being totally honest. Like, this thing does itself.
I think a lot of it might have to do with the long form Because
Yeah.
people are so used to seeing people's opinions condensed and filtered into these sound bites and snippets, and to hear an extended conversation with someone where they can actually tell stories and articulate their opinions in a nuanced, careful way is so rare.
I agree. It's one of the reasons why I don't do those shows anymore, like panel shows and things like that. It's
Yeah.
just so frustrating.
Oh, it's insane. I have very little experience with that sort of thing, but I did Dr. Oz last
One
year.
of the worst ones.
Yes, and I don't know how any normal person could function in that sort of environment. I mean, I have a TV show, so arguably I'm well trained for that sort of thing, but unless you're an actor who's prepared a line to say as soon as they point at you, there's no way that you could function, because it's not a genuine conversation. It's just an opportunity to launch one sentence sound bites and then audience applause.
Yeah, and also the audience is such a strange element to add to a conversation. I mean, if you and I were having this conversation exactly in this room, but to the left of us is an enormous group of people, we'd feel weird. We would have to address them. We'd have to turn to them. It would be odd.
Following illuminated applause and laughter signs.
Oh, God, those are the weirdest. When there's always the warm-up guy who's like, okay, everybody, we're coming back from break. We're coming back from break. And they hold up the sign, applause, 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 and everybody goes crazy.
And they create the worst environment. I was on this discussion about kratom. Are you familiar with this?
I'm on it right now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I just took some.
What? Whoa.
There's applause, applause.
Whoa. He said I'm on it right
They
now.
create the worst environment. I was on this discussion about kratom. Are you familiar with this?
I'm on it right now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I just took some. I fucked my knee up the other day. I did something, and it's been stiff and painful, so I iced it before I came here, and then I just took 6 of them. See what happens.
Wow.
I took 10 once. Oof.
10
10
1-gram
pills?
capsules?
Yeah.
I don't know how much.
I don't know. Can you grab that bag? There's a bag that's sitting right up on the sink. I'll tell you exactly what's in it. But now I get why people might think it's a drug.
What is a drug?
Yeah, for sure. But when I took 4, I was like, well, I took 2 for the first time I took it. I took 2, and a couple times I took 2. And I'm like, this is like a mild stimulant. But then when you get into the range of 8 to 10 pills, it's like, oh, this will fuck you up. This stuff. The stuff I take is Urban Ice Organics, and see, it says take 2.
It doesn't say the amount of material in the capsule. 750 milligrams. Okay.
So not quite a gram.
Not quite a gram. All right. Seems like a reasonable amount. But they always construct these things in these ridiculous, dramatic oppositions. Like it was me versus a woman whose son had died of some kratom-associated overdose. And, it turns into a thing like, well, what do you have to say to this woman whose son died? It's like, I don't know. There are people that die from caffeine overdoses as well. It's tragic that this happens.
Have people died from this?
Yes. They
How
have.
much do you have to take?
An enormous amount. I mean, I think a lot of people set up these unrealistic expectations with these drugs where they like a drug, they want to say, it's impossible for
Right.
it to kill anyone. It's
Right.
impossible. There's no possible
Right.
way. If you set that as your standard, you'll always fail. Because
Right.
people will die doing absolutely everything. Running, having sex, defecating, aspirin, absolutely. There's nothing in this world that can't find its way into a human death. So if people want to say, and even, cannabis, obviously, people say you can't overdose on cannabis, and essentially you can't. But if you look in the medical literature, there are a number of these cannabis-associated fatalities. You can debate them endlessly, but the point is once a drug enters a large enough population, there'll be a number of sensitive individuals, and someone will die. It doesn't mean that the drug is dangerous. It means that it's unrealistic to set a standard where if anything bad happens to anyone, we have to decide that the drug is dangerous and should be banned.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, look, water kills people. There's a lot of these hazing things where the fraternity kids will be asked to drink a shit ton of water, and people have died from it. A woman died in San Jose a few years back from a contest to drink water to get her son like an Xbox or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that are lethal, but the LD50 for cannabis is like, you literally have to smoke your body weight or something, right?
It's
something crazy.
It would be very difficult.
Yeah, but doesn't mean that you couldn't get so high that you did something really stupid and wind up dying.
Right.
Yeah, especially depending upon the person and the biological variabilities.
Right, exactly. And it's just, I think it's also just a sort of a bad road to go down. People always want to emphasize the safety of things,
Right.
but in my opinion, safety isn't the point. It doesn't ultimately matter to me whether or not something is safe. I think we should have the freedom to do dangerous things if we choose. We're allowed to ride motorcycles, we're allowed to shoot guns, you're allowed to go skydiving and bungee jumping. All those things carry risks, but it's assumed that any adult that does them is aware of those risks.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, it's also, who is, if the society that we live in was just you and I, because we were the only two people alive, who are you to tell me what I can do or me to tell you what you can do? It's ridiculous. And so when you have grown adults, telling a grown adult who's informed what they can and can't do, then it becomes a question of children. Well, then it becomes an education issue, and it becomes a parental issue. I mean, it's just, you can't lie to your children about the effects of certain drugs, because then they're not going to believe you about the actual dangerous ones.
Right. And this is, of course, reflected in the...
So, Rogan just said he took 10 pills at 700 milligrams, which is a little bit less than a gram. 10 pills. He took almost 8 or 9 grams of kratom at one time. Yo, Scott, that's what's up, yo. That's crazy. Because I took fucking 3 grams at one time, and that shit fucked me up. And then I took like a gram, and I think that's probably about as much as my system can handle, is like a gram of that shit. And Rogan said he took like 8 grams. Like, what the fuck?
the so-called opioid epidemic
Yes.
right now.
Yes.
There's endless finger pointing. Everyone wants to find a culprit that's behind all of it. And the easiest person to blame, of course, are pharmaceutical companies, because everybody hates pharmaceutical companies, so why not blame them?
Right.
But, you know, and I'm not pro-pharmaceutical by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm also not anti-pharmaceutical either. And when you look at the way, for example, the New York Times is covering the opioid epidemic, it's always in this tone of like documents were uncovered that show that executives at Purdue Pharma were aware that morphine was addictive as early as 1999. And it's like, well, of course they were aware. People have known that morphine is addictive for hundreds of years. This is old news. And this whole idea that doctors were convinced by some letter in the New England Journal of Medicine that said that OxyContin isn't addictive is absurd. These are all morphine derivatives. Any adult, especially a medically trained adult, should know that no matter what little variation you make on that molecule, if it's structurally and pharmacologically and qualitatively similar to morphine, of course it's going to be addictive. And that in and of itself isn't even a bad thing. It should be okay to give people addictive drugs as well, as long as everyone's aware of the risks.
As long as they understand a protocol to get off of it. You know, there's so many people that get on these things and then wind up taking them far longer than they're supposed to because it's easy to get hooked. I mean, we need to at least have some sort of responsible direction that these people need to go to get off of them once they're on them. Because people that get back operations, anything where they prescribe you high doses of opiates, it's a huge problem. I know many people have gotten it. And in fact, I should tell you that my good friend Justin Bren, his wife found out about Kratom because of you. Because of your show, he had a problem with his shoulder, got shoulder surgery. They put him on OxyContins. He was fucked up on them, and he was having a really hard time getting off it, having the shakes really bad, and Kratom is the only thing that got him off of it.
Right, and that's not surprising. I mean, this has been known for a very long time in Thailand, and that was actually the reason that it was originally prohibited. I don't know if you're aware of that, but because the government taxed opium, and people started using kratom, then they made kratom illegal.
Is that the right way to say it? Because people say kratom.
Yeah.
You're the only one I've heard say kratom.
It's a Thai word. People in Thailand call it kratom.
Oh, okay.
So people in the U.S. call it kratom.
I call it what the
also
Thai
they have
people
vegan
call
ones,
it.
I think it's
Kratom.
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 Right.
We're not going to go that far.
Right,
but kratom is closer.
If you did, it would be weird.
yeah. But I feel as, yeah.
Like American people that say Ecuador, Argentina.
But it is kratom.
Yeah, kratom. Okay, so we'll try to call it kratom.
Or something close to that. It's closer to that than kratom.
Right.
Kratom.
And so the reason why it was made illegal was because of the fact that it was pinching some of the profits off of the opium trade.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's fucked. fucked up.
And so this has been known for a long time that it helps people get off more addictive opioids. And
How does it do that?
well, it's an opioid itself, and a lot of people don't want to admit or acknowledge that, but I think we need to get beyond this idea that drugs are inherently bad or opioids are inherently bad just because the ones that we're aware of have a lot of problems. You know, in some sense, medicinal chemistry and pharmacology and all this are still in a very primitive state, and there's so much to be learned. So we're mostly giving people these derivatives of morphine that have been around for 100 years, and there are better things. We're going to continuously discover less addictive treatments for pain, and I think that the alkaloids in Kratom are a step in that direction, and which is so tragic that they're trying to now make it illegal, because this is something that, as far as I can tell, has genuinely helped an enormous number of people reduce their intake of more addictive and more dangerous opioids.
Well, one of the things that I felt, I mean, and again, my dose was not extremely high, but when I was on it, I was very coherent. It was clear to me that I was affected by something, but it felt kind of good. It didn't feel bad. It felt a little uneasy, like a little like, whoa, this world feels a little weird right now, but it did not feel like I was impaired. Like, I know a lot of people who take it and exercise. Like, I have a friend, he'll take 10 pills and exercise. It just seems kind of fucking crazy.
Yes.
But he says he has a great workout
Right.
by taking that stuff before he works out.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to lend itself to a lot of different applications. In Thailand, it's used almost exclusively for that sort of purpose in the South. It's a drug that laborers use so that they can, collect the latex from rubber trees and just get their job done. That's what it's about. I mean, that's what opioids are about for a lot of the world, both in the United States and in Africa and in Thailand, is, people live hard lives, and manual labor is painful and repetitive and difficult, and anything that makes that a little bit more manageable is a very important tool for humans.
I always felt like people that did heroin or opiates or something like that were on a very short road to death. That was my perception when I was a kid. And then I had a friend who was a longshoreman. They worked on the docks. They would bring fish in and fillet the fish for the market. And he worked with a guy that every day at lunch, the guy would go cop. He would get his heroin. He would shoot it up in his car, and then he'd go back to work. And I was like, he'd go back to work? And you're like, yep, he worked every day. Like, every day he shot up and every day he worked. Like, yeah, he was never late. Nope, just did his work. Like,
Right.
Wow. Well, I didn't think you could do that. I thought you did heroin. The next thing you know, you'd just be on the floor in a fetal position in your own urine, and you just would fall apart and die.
Right. Yeah, there's this idea that people sometimes refer to as pharmacological determinism, that a certain drug has to do a certain thing. So alcohol has to sedate and disinhibit you. Heroin has to addict you and make you a slave to it and kill you. Cocaine has to be a euphoric thing that's done at parties that's also very addictive. PCP has to make you strip nude and run around
Fighting cops.
Compton, fighting cops and punching holes in wooden fences. But when you look at this, anthropologists have looked at certain drugs that are used cross-culturally, like alcohol, and what you find is this whole idea of pharmacological determinism is fundamentally flawed. Drugs behave differently in different cultures, depending on the set and setting of the user. And so you find all sorts of instances that are major exceptions to these rules that we've set up for these various drugs. For example, PCP, which is arguably one of the most ubiquitously maligned drugs in the world. I mean, no one can imagine that PCP is medicinal, but even to this day, PCP is in Schedule 2, not Schedule 1 like cannabis and LSD. Schedule 2, it can still be prescribed, actually, and that's because it had a history of medicinal use. There was even PCP psychotherapy in the UK in the 50s. So this is something that most people wouldn't believe, but to those patients that were taking it then, there was none of this cultural association with PCP being a drug that causes psychosis or makes you strip nude. It was simply another tool for a psychiatrist to use and help people release repressed memories or traumas that they were afraid to talk about when sober.
Well, we're seeing that now with MDMA, right? I mean, and also ketamine. ketamine being used as an actual tool for psychotherapy, particularly for people with depression. It's having really good results. My friend, excuse me, Neil Brennan, who's a hilarious comedian, has had struggles with depression. He got great relief from taking ketamine.
Right. And what I think is really interesting is, this is often packaged as a sort of psychedelic renaissance, but I think in a larger context, it's a drug-facilitated psychotherapy renaissance, because this was not just limited to psychedelics. People did something called narcoanalysis, where they would give people sedatives like propofol, the drug that killed Michael Jackson, or various barbiturates or various other drugs, and the relaxing effect would allow people to talk more openly to a therapist, and it was considered very effective. Now this idea of a psychiatrist injecting you with a drug in order to help you talk about your problems it's unheard of. I don't think anyone does it anymore, but it used to be very common, and I think a return to that is going to be really beneficial.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the right drugs with the right cases and the right people, and I think we've got to get past these schedules. That when you have things like marijuana and psilocybin and especially DMT, which your own body produces, is a Schedule 1 drug, in the famous Terence McKenna line, we're all holding, when it comes to DMT, it's just stupid. It's stupid that these things are Schedule 1. When you're saying there's no medical benefit whatsoever or medical application for cannabis, it's fucking crazy. When you want to have something that really actively promotes a distrust in law enforcement. The scheduling of drugs is one of the best ones, because when you look at something like marijuana and you see that that's a Schedule 1 drug, that's infuriating to people that gain huge benefits from cannabis. I mean, people that have going through chemotherapy, people that have interocular pressure from glaucoma. I mean, you can go down the list over and over and over again. Kids that have epilepsy. There's so many people that have had great benefit, particularly from edible cannabis. For people that have seizures. I mean, you could keep going on and on and on. It's an amazing plant. And to have that demonized because of some ridiculous propaganda from the 1930s that still somehow or another clung on in 2018. We think about all the information we have now with the internet and the fact that cannabis is still Schedule 1. You have assholes like Jeff Sessions still saying things like good people don't smoke marijuana. Like, this is crazy talk.
It's crazy, but keep in mind it was just about 100 years ago that alcohol was prohibited in the United States, and it took 13 years to reverse that. And that was alcohol. There's no drug more integrated into our culture than alcohol, and that took 13 years to reverse.
What was that like back then? That must have been madness when alcohol was illegal, when the cops would come in and jackbooted thugs would knock over gin mills and bust open kegs of whiskey and spill it all out. Like, what the fuck was that like?
It was disastrous, but I think what's interesting about that is it was a worthwhile experiment. To give them the benefit of the doubt, it was worthwhile to see, because on some sense, you could say that prohibition has a certain logic to it. You could say drugs cause problems, so if we just make all the drugs illegal, then maybe those problems will disappear. But it didn't work. The experiment failed, and there's nothing wrong with a failed experiment, but it's a problem if you keep repeating it over and over and over again for 100 years looking for a different result.
Right. And then go to other drugs and go, well, this one, let's try this one. Let's make this one illegal.
And it's a terrible PR situation for the police as well. If I were a police officer, I would be the biggest opponent of the war on drugs of anyone in the government, because when you think about why does the average person in New York City love a firefighter? They love firefighters, but they hate cops. Why is that? It's because of the drug war. Because a firefighter isn't going to hurt you for something that wasn't really a crime to begin with, for some kind of victimless crime. A firefighter is just there to help you, to save you if you're in trouble. And the same would be true of police officers if it weren't for the drug war. Ideally. There's a little more complexity to it
Sure.
than that.
There's certain...
The next sports video could cost you up to 56 cents in data.
What?
Switch to Xfinity Mobile and save.
Certainly more complexity when it comes to shootings and things along those lines. But I mean, the stop and frisk. I've read something about stop and frisk in New York when they had that instituted. That most of it was drugs. Most of it was catching people with marijuana.
Yeah.
Which is just fucking insane. You just hey, you look like you might be streetwise. Get over here.
And that's the way these laws have functioned from the very beginning. I mean, if you look at drug law in the UK, it tends to be very black and white. Something is legal or illegal. If it's legal, it can be sold in stores because it's legal. If it's illegal, it can't be sold anywhere. In the US, they've instead created this nebulous, far-reaching gray area where there's all sorts of things that are maybe illegal, kind of illegal, do it but don't get caught. And it's created an ability for the government to selectively prosecute people whenever they want, if they want.
Yeah. Well, that seems to be lessening. I mean, when you have someone like Jeff Sessions in office, it's very disturbing. But then Trump says things like he's very strong on states' rights to, pass marijuana laws, and things along those lines. You're very incredulous.
I don't know. I mean, I suppose I am a bit incredulous when it comes to Trump doing anything good. But
I think if you told him that people love him more if he did things good, he would do things good.
That's probably true.
I think
if someone that he trusted said it, yeah.
I think that's his. I think we got to get somebody in deep. We got to get a mole in there. Got to get somebody who's good at back rubs. Gets behind.
Yeah, I heard Trump was going to legalize weed. I was like, motherfucker, don't make me like you.
I mean,
you pussy grabbing some bitch.
What is the thing that'll help?
You gonna legalize marijuana? God damn it, Trump! You my homie now.
Shit. And one thing that I am certain will help, and it's sort of tragic that this is the case, but it's capitalism. It's the corporatization of these drugs.
Yes.
Because with cannabis, when it was hippies and the counterculture.
Oh, you about to handle with that truth real quick. I hear it coming.
Down the streets of New York holding up 420 signs. It doesn't, I suppose, have all that much clout in the eyes of lawmakers. But when you have some guy from Yale Business School who's never smoked weed, who says, this is a serious business opportunity.
Yeah.
We're going to make it big, and gets investors, invests millions and millions of dollars into it, hires lobbyists, plays the game like a capitalist, then the laws do change. And I wish that weren't the case, but it is. And it's tragic for the people that did fight and did go to prison and did sacrifice, that then these business school guys come along and reap all of the benefits, but that's the way it works.
Yeah, that is the way it works, and that's okay. I mean, it's just a weird path. It's a weird path, but as long as we can get to legalization, I'm 100% for that path. I just think that might be the only way. In this weird country, this country is so enamored with money. I mean, we're so enamored with money and profits, and even for dying people, even old people. Like Warren Buffett invested shit tons of money in warehouses to sell to grow cannabis in Colorado when the laws were passed. I mean, that guy's 150,000 years old. He's worth billions of dollars, and he's like, who gives a shit? I'm making more money now, and more and more and more. I mean, even when they're really old, they're massively motivated by profit.
Yes. And I think the same will be true for psychedelics, and will probably be true for all of these things, because you need to have lobbyists.
Yeah.
You need to have this sort of typical white-collar support to push things forward.
I agree. I don't see any other way around it right now. I mean, the real hope is that cannabis, not that it will get rid of capitalism, but that we'll figure out. It's hard to wear those things with glasses on, right?
Yes.
Ari's talking about it. The glasses dig into your head. That cannabis will, not just cannabis, but cannabis will open the door to all these different substances that will allow people to gain a greater perspective. This is the ultimate goal, in my opinion, is to give people the opportunity to step outside the momentum of their lives and look at things with fresh eyes and make clear decisions. This is one of the best things that I think that drugs provide, is that these psychedelic drugs in particular provide an escape from the momentum of this life that you've created or that you've found yourself a part of. It's very difficult for people to stop behavior patterns, to stop and to just look at themselves objectively and sort of rethink, regroup, and reassess. And this is one of the best things about cannabis and about psilocybin and a lot of these other psychedelic drugs, is that it gives you this newfound perspective that allows you to reconsider things.
Yes, absolutely. And I think with ketamine and the treatment of depression, it's a similar idea, because depressed people become used to these very ingrained patterns of thinking, and anything that can break you out of that, that can shake it up for a minute and maybe give you a different perspective, I think is inherently therapeutic.
Yeah, I think so as well. And I think I'm hoping that what I see, and this is what I believe I see, is that we're changing our perceptions of it. I had a conversation with a friend of mine the other day about marijuana, where we were talking about how you used to hide whether or not you did it from certain people. And now that group of people that you have to hide it from is smaller and smaller. And that it seems like everyone casually smokes marijuana now in our circles. There's so many people that do. There's a few that don't, sober people and whatever. But it's way more common. Whereas 10, 15 years ago, this was something you hid. If you had a good job, if you had a family, this is not something you wanted people to know about.
And what I think is really interesting is that in and of itself changes the nature of the cannabis experience. So I think if somebody uses cannabis in a culture that supports it, that approves of it, their experience will be better by virtue of that fact.
Right.
So there's a certain shame that a lot of people feel when using any drug. I, for whatever crazy reason, feel it a little bit with cannabis. It's, just a hair of, I should be studying, I should be reading, I should be, more focused. This is a little hedonistic.
See, that's why I can paint and smoke at the same time. I'm smoking and still being productive.
It's a little comfort oriented. I should be working harder. But that's, I think, just the vestiges of this propaganda that I've been fed or something like that. Or maybe it's true. But I understand from one perspective why the cannabis culture drums the benefits of cannabis so hard, that it cures all disease, that it's good for you, that it cures cancer, all this stuff. Because if you have that in your mind, at the very least, it's going to reduce that sort of internal shame that you might feel and makes the entire experience healthier and more beneficial. Because we do construct these limitations. We construct these experiences to some extent. So if you decide that cannabis is a dissociative drug that's hedonistic and comfort-oriented and will take you away from your responsibilities, then that's what it will become. But if you decide, like Terence McKenna did, that it's an intellectual catalyst, that it will facilitate your ability to read and learn and think and write, then it will become that as well.
Yeah, it's a weird one, right? Because people that take it that are prone to paranoia, or that are dealing with like some difficult issues in their life right now that they're perhaps trying to avoid, it becomes an uncomfortable experience. Whereas people that are happy and having a good time and in a good place, the marijuana will sort of enhance that. It'll give you this loving, warm feeling of comfort and of like a sort of acceptance of your existence, and it's going to be okay.
Right. But I think even the paranoia is like a sort of meme, you could say, a sort of vestige of this propaganda that makes people afraid, in the same vein as the bad trip. I think the concept of a bad trip is a very damaging concept because, and I know from personal experience, I never really used psychedelics in high school with the exception of salvia because I was terrified of a bad trip. I talked to friends who described bad trips and they'd say, oh, it's a bad trip. It's really bad, it's scary, and I would think, oh, that's terrible. I would never want a bad trip. I'm never going to touch these things because a bad trip would be too much for me to tolerate. And then I started using psychedelics and I realized there's no such thing as a bad trip any more than there's a bad meal or a bad relationship or a bad day. I mean, having an occasional bad thing in life doesn't stop you from doing things like eating or having relationships or living typically. So
what do you mean by are you saying there's no such thing as a bad trip?
Yes.
You're saying there's no such thing as a bad meal?
I'm saying that there is such thing as a bad meal, but it wouldn't prevent you from tripping. And I think that even the bad, or wouldn't prevent you from eating, rather. Sorry about that. But I think even these bad trips, although they can be difficult, are beneficial in our learning experience. In the same way that a bad meal could be. You learn not to go to that restaurant, or maybe you learn something about what makes you sick or what to be careful of in the future. If you are approaching life from a non-fearful perspective where your intention is to learn, then you can extract benefit from almost any experience. And these difficult psychedelic experiences, I genuinely believe, and this is what is maybe the hardest thing to communicate about psychedelics, is that it's the difficult ones that are often the best. Those are the ones that really teach you something. And when you're trying to talk about psychedelics with people who've never used them, it's not a great selling point to say, oh, you know, the best thing that can happen is you're going to think you're going to die. But that is arguably the best thing that can happen, is to think that you're going to die. Because that's a confrontation with the overarching fear, the fear that generates all other fears. And if you conquer that fear, then your life will almost certainly improve.
Well, what is one thing that's sort of genuinely universally accepted as a beneficial experience is a near-death experience. It's sort of universally accepted as a transformative moment in people's lives. Like, I had this near-death experience and I realized, wow, I got to get my shit together. After that heart attack, I realized that life is a gift, and I changed the way I think about things, and I started calling people that I loved and telling them that I loved them. This is the same. You can get a near-death experience from cannabis. You just don't ever die. But you really do. I mean, it's the death of so many perceptions and so many things about your life, especially from edible cannabis, which I think is probably one of the least understood and most potent things that people are consuming on a daily basis. I can't tell you how many times I've given someone edible marijuana and they're fucking convinced that it's been laced with something awful and that they're going to die. But then afterwards, they come out of it and they're like, oh, I got some work to do. The only way I would disagree with you is people that are prone to psychotic breaks.
Yes.
People, yeah, because there's an absolute genuine connection between people who have a slippery hold on reality and some experiences with psychedelics that lead them down a bad road.
That's true. It's a stressor, and like all stressors, it can precipitate a psychotic break. They've done pretty large-scale epidemiological analyses of psychedelic drug users versus the non-psychedelic drug using population, and the incidence of mental illness isn't any higher. So I don't think that you can argue that psychedelics cause mental illness, but you can, and in some measures, it seems to actually reduce it in terms of things like alcoholism, substance abuse disorders. But it can be a stressor that would precipitate such an episode in a susceptible individual. And I had a very traumatic and formative experience myself where my best friend had a psychotic break while I was with him tripping. So I've seen this firsthand. I know exactly what it looks like.
Yeah, I've had friends have real bad experiences too, where they're screaming and yelling and then disassociative, and then afterwards become very strange and have a really hard time with reality for a bit.
Yeah.
I've never seen someone have a complete psychotic break.
This was that. He never recovered.
Never.
He never recovered. He was my best friend at the time, and he never recovered.
So he was fine before the psychedelics?
Yes.
Jesus Christ.
But again, and that happened early.
And so now he's still fucked?
Yes.
Damn.
But again, I typically don't tell that story in public because it could be misinterpreted as a scare story. It's impossible to prove the counterfactual. Would it have happened without psychedelics? Almost certainly. I can't say. All I know is that he took a very high dose of a psilocin ester and had this episode. He was hospitalized and he was not the same afterwards. So I'm aware that this is something that happens, but it also typically happens in the early 20s, late teens, the same time that people typically have psychotic breaks and develop schizophrenia.
Yeah, the instances of schizophrenia in people who use cannabis are, cannabis in particular, but I don't know about other psychedelics, but I would imagine they're very similar. They're exactly the same as the incidences of schizophrenia in non-using populations. It's like 1%. 1% across the board seem to have issues with schizophrenia. And the real question is, how many of those people could, is it avoidable? Like, if your friend had never done that and instead had, become a marathon runner or something and, found some other outlets for his energy, would he have never gone down that road? We don't know.
It's impossible.
Yeah, it's impossible to say. I think it's very important to talk about that, though. And with further research, perhaps we could isolate genes, like they have for CTE. Now they have, they can do an analysis of your genes and then determine whether or not something like football would be a dangerous path for you because you have a higher probability of developing CTE. It would be wonderful if they figured out a way to do that with psilocybin or with cannabis or with anything else and be able to recognize the potential links to psychotic breaks and to, you know, a host of different mental disorders that could possibly be triggered by high doses.
Yes. I mean, this is one of so many things that needs to be done. And that's, you know, everyone's very excited about all this clinical research that's happening right now. I'm excited about it as well. But on one level, it is very politically oriented research. You know, the things that they're looking at have actually typically been done before, not all of it. But the aim is to firmly establish these things that have been known for a long time. Psilocybin occasions mystical type experience, or MDMA is useful for treating PTSD, or psilocybin has an anti-addictive effect. These are things that people have known for a little while, but now it's about proving it. But I'm really looking forward to getting deeper into these serious questions about, you know, exactly how these drugs interact with various subtypes of serotonin receptors, because I think that they're going to be very important tools for understanding consciousness as a whole.
Yeah, it would also be interesting knowing how they react to different diets. You know, when people are, you know, when you're eating certain types of foods that are bad for your body, I would really be curious to see what kind of effect that has. I mean, when you have real large-scale research that goes over really important variables in terms of like human health, and then you add in these different substances, whether it's psilocybin or cannabis or whatever it is, it's going to be interesting to see how the body reacts to these various perturbances, these various changes of your state.
Yeah, and that's, you know, traditionally in a lot of these indigenous groups, the diet plays a big role in the way that the drug is administered, and I think we're slowly rediscovering a lot of things that have been known for tens, maybe hundreds, maybe thousands of years in some of these indigenous groups. Have you had a chance to see any of my new show? By any chance?
No, I haven't.
Oh, you think you'd like it?
I'm sure I'd like it. I like your old show.
Yeah, I think it's a lot better than the old show. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, but I had the opportunity to look at the way salvia is used in the mountains of Oaxaca, and, you know, Native American peyote use and all these different things. And yeah, there's so much to be learned from all of these traditions that are not reflected in the current clinical climate, because they can't be. But I think that that's going to be a part of it, is slowly integrating these other alkaloids that are present in the plants to see what role they play, in the same way that, you know, the initial medicalization of cannabis was Marinol, which is just THC and sesame oil, but now there's increased understanding of the way these accessory cannabinoids modulate the THC experience, or whether THC is even the primary therapeutic agent for certain disorders. And I imagine the same thing will be true for peyote and for the iboga alkaloids, and probably even for some of the chemicals found in mushrooms.
So when you're doing the show, have you had any problems? Have you had any pushback against what you're doing, or any issues with it being on Vice?
I've had an enormous amount of freedom. You know, ultimately I have very, very little to complain about when it comes to censorship. There was, the way the show got started, the actual TV show, was sort of an interesting story, where they were starting up Viceland, and a producer who's now gone gave me this deck of drug stories they were going to do, and they were all kind of terrible scare stories, like the new drug, Bromo Dragonfly, it's killing teens, a new drug.
Bromo Dragonfly? Is that real?
Yeah.
What is that?
It's a really fascinating compound developed by this chemist David E. Nichols, who found that these conformationally constrained benzofuran amphetamine derivatives are like very high potency DOB derivatives. Anyway, it's a super potent psychedelic amphetamine that has a cool tricyclic structure.
Huh.
And it looks like a dragonfly. The molecule looks like a dragonfly, kind of.
And it's got a very high...
Yes, it's super, super potent and very, very long-lasting.
Ooh.
So it lent itself to scare stories. You know, it's a potent vasoconstrictor, so people would take very high doses of it, and occasionally they would have to amputate a finger or something like that. But again, you know, this isn't because the drug is bad, it's because people used it irresponsibly, and this is something that people have so much difficulty understanding. We're so eager to blame drugs for all of our problems. Drugs have never hurt anyone. They're just inanimate constellations of carbon and hydrogen and nitrogen and oxygen. They don't jump out of their bags and vials and attack your serotonin or receptors or dopamine transporter or anything like that. So this is just a weird pattern that we've done repeatedly over time. And I don't know if you read the new Michael Pollan book. I know he was on the podcast.
I'm in it right now.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, it is great.
But one thing that I thought was interesting about it is that he put a lot of the emphasis on the prohibition of psychedelics on Leary. And Leary almost certainly played a role, but I think it's slightly ironic that he's a journalist and didn't really go that deep into the role that journalists played in all of this, which was humongous. You know, journalists are sculptors of public opinion, and it became the standard way of reporting on any of these things to say that they're bad, to sensationalize it, and to not have any consideration for what that would do. Because anytime a journalist writes some scare story, they can really mess with drug policy in a serious way. It might seem like nothing, like, oh, there's a bunch of people in Brooklyn and they overdosed on some obscure synthetic cannabinoid, AMB fubinica. Who cares about AMB fubinica? No big deal. Say that it turns people into zombies, and if it gets thrown into Schedule 1, who cares? Not a big deal. Well, that's a very short-sighted way of thinking about all of this, because that's exactly what happened with psychedelics. And then we're not learning from the mistakes of the past, that just because something it's fun to sensationalize and talk about how dangerous it is at this moment doesn't mean that 10 years from now we're going to recognize that it has serious therapeutic potential and we made a big mistake outlawing it. And I think a lot of that also comes from this sort of us versus them mentality that people have, where it's cannabis is good, synthetic cannabinoids are bad. Well, synthetic cannabinoids don't have to be bad for cannabis to be good. Cannabis can be good without something else being bad to counterbalance it. You don't need to hate something to justify your love of cannabis. And this whole hatred of synthetic cannabinoids, I think, is totally misdirected, because these are products of prohibition that most people wouldn't even want to use in the first place. And when they do use them, they don't know what they're taking, they don't know what dose they're consuming, and so of course they're having bad experiences. That would happen with almost any drug, caffeine included, if people just consumed enormous, unmeasured doses without having any idea what they were getting into. And so they're thrown into Schedule 1. Well, what happens if 30 years from now, once the therapeutic potential of cannabinoids is being really seriously explored, we find out that that AMB fubinica that everyone was saying turned homeless people into zombies in Brooklyn in 2017 turns out to activate a certain subtype of the CB1 receptor that's especially useful for Parkinson's disease or something like that. Then we're going to regret having done that. So I think people have to be very careful. Anytime you say anything negative about a drug, you have to be very, very careful, because the implications can be enormous. I think that the best stance in all of this is to not speak ill of drugs, of any drug. Give the drugs a break.
Like a true drug enthusiast. But it's not a problem also with just what journalism is. It's like asking a comedian to talk about something but not make fun of it. It's what their job, in a certain sense, is to get people excited about things. And I don't know whether you'd say the lazy way out or the common approach is to say something that scares people. I mean, that's what clickbait is mostly about, either outrage or fear.
That's true. But there's a lot of richness in truth.
I agree, but it's hard to sell. It's hard to sell that richness.
I don't think it's even hard to sell. I think that people are lazy, you know. Right. There's this idea that a lot of people have that, you know, journalism is organized by some malevolent Rupert Murdoch type puppeteer who's telling everyone to, you go off and you say that cannabis causes car accidents, and you go off and you say this evil thing about this and say that alcohol is good.
Did you see when Alex Jones was on my podcast and got high with me? We got him drunk and high, and when it came up in his trial for his divorce, he said that George Soros puts he tests marijuana every year to see how much George Soros is influencing the levels of THC. That was his excuse.
But people love these ideas. They love the ideas of the puppeteer, the malevolent puppeteer, because it denies individual agency. But the reality, and I say this as a journalist who's worked at many different publications, not just Vice, and this is a difficult reality to swallow, is that people are free to say whatever they want most of the time. That journalists choose to report on things this way.
Yeah, that is true, but it's also true that I've been a part of stories where I've talked to the author of it, and they said, well, this was manipulated by the editor. The editor manipulated the title, the change.
Well, that's a great excuse.
Yeah.
From the perspective of the writer.
But it's true. Like the Rolling Stone did an article about me, and they called me a psychedelic warrior. And I said to the guy who wrote that, "What the fuck is that?" I was laughing, and he goes, "Dude, I did not write that."
Yeah.
The editor gets a hold of it, tries to make it more salacious. It becomes something that's more. It's more likely for people to buy or click.
Right, especially with headlines. That is true. And the real problem is that this sort of outrage culture and comment culture that has emerged provides no incentive for truth. Because suppose someone were to write an article about this conversation we're having right now, and it could say, Hamilton Morris says kratom should be illegal, or something like that, then that will get so much more engagement, because then you'll have all these people saying, fuck Hamilton, he's a traitor, how dare he say that it should be illegal, that it didn't watch it. And then you'll have other people arguing with those people saying, well, listen to the interview, hey, he actually never said anything about that, listen carefully to what he was saying. And then you create this whole engagement, a bigger engagement for doing the wrong thing than you get for doing the right thing.
True, but the initial statement is much stickier. The initial statement of Hamilton Morris is a bad guy because he thinks kratom should be illegal, or kratom should be illegal. That is what more people are going to pay attention to. Far less people read the retraction than read the initial.
Of course.
This is one of the real more insidious things about printing things that are patently untrue purposely. That people do things that are untrue with the caveat that they could just print a retraction that maybe 30% of the people that read the original article are going to read. The initial imprint is what's going to stick with people. Even if someone calls you a rapist, okay, and then it turns out that the person who called you a rapist was lying. The people who heard you were a rapist first, they still have that in their head. Oh, he's a rapist.
Yeah,
I heard he's a rapist. Right. It's very difficult to get slippery ideas out of people's heads. So if somebody writes some article saying that you're against the legalization of certain drugs, and they start looking at you as being compromised, the influence that people have today can't be understated because the reach is so powerful. The reach of any article, any video, it's so significantly greater than any other sort of distribution of information in the history of human beings. The potential for it impacting large groups of people is so huge now.
Yes. And this is the result of that is also that the viewers have a lot of power, and I think that in some sense they don't quite recognize the nature of that power. It's like voting with your dollar. If you spend all of your time commenting hatefully on things you don't like, you are actively encouraging the production of more of that thing that you don't like.
Right.
If you like something, you need to engage with what you approve of more, because every time you engage with something you dislike, advertisements are sold, and it has been incentivized to do that bad thing. And that's a really sticky thing when we have this culture where everyone loves to show their outrage and virtue signal and show that they're on the right side and all this stuff constantly, to say, hey, step back, you're just feeding the problem.
Yeah. I think there's also a problem with a lot of what people are doing during the day is something they don't want to do. A lot of what people are doing is some job that they don't enjoy, and during that job they have freedom to go online. And in this state of feeling like shit about whatever they're doing, they enjoy complaining about stuff. And so they'll read things and type things and get engaged in things, and there's some sort of a sport to getting pissed off about stuff. Instead of just spending your time doing things you actually enjoy. It seems so simple. It sounds like a simple solution. But if you could figure out a way to actively ignore things that are going to piss you off and seek out things that are going to excite you and intrigue you, you're going to be a healthier, happier person. And isn't that ultimately what everybody wants? I want to be happier. Don't you want to be happier?
Of course.
But why do we seek out shit that pisses us off?
Because it becomes a sort of addiction.
Yes.
It's drug-like in and of itself. I mean, I see it. These arguments, these people are frittering away their finite time on Earth, engaged in these endless comment battles that no one reads, and it's a very dark reality. But it is also something that's driving the current culture of journalism where truth doesn't matter as much. All that matters is engagement.
Right. Right. It's just clicks. It's just clicks and money. It's interesting that you were saying something about drugs being inanimate objects and drugs don't actually kill people. It's so funny how drug enthusiasts parallel gun enthusiasts with their arguments. It's really the same freedom argument.
And it's really, and I'm in an interesting perspective because I live in New York. I'm like a whatever, just a nerdy guy that doesn't.
Let me guess, you live in Williamsburg.
I do. Yes, yeah. Big surprise. Well, that's where the office that I work. I live close to the office that I work at. But you know, I have no interest in guns. I'm not. So it's really easy for me to say, well, look, there was this shooting, and all these people died,
Right.
and this other guy got shot, and these things are really causing a lot of problems. Let's get rid of them because it doesn't impact me. And that's where you have to be the most careful, because the worst thing you can possibly do is make judgments about how other people should conduct their lives based on your own preferences, which people do all the time. So you hear someone say, well, I don't like cannabis. I don't smoke it. Why should it be legal? Because people go to prison for it. Because it ruins people's lives who aren't your own, and you have to think about people that aren't you. And so it's very difficult when it comes to gun control issues, because I'm faced with that exact same issue, where it would be so easy for me to say, get rid of them all. It doesn't impact me. I don't like guns, but I don't want to fall into that same trap.
Yeah, it is a trap. And it also sort of highlights how slippery life is in general, that these absolutes that we look for, these ones and zeros, they don't necessarily exist in a lot of subjects. You know, there's a lot of people that have done bad things that have also done great things. And that gets weird too. You know, just human beings in general, we're complex creatures. You know, and to just categorize something as negative or positive, there's a lot of positive things that you could find with drugs. There's a lot of negative things you could find with drugs too, and they mirror human behavior. There's a lot of positive and negatives in human behavior.
Yes. And back to this journalistic issue and the coverage of drugs, I mean, one thing that worries me about the way cannabis and kratom and psychedelics are presented is that it's always couched in they're safe, they're therapeutic, they're spiritual, they're historical. But that isn't the point. Even if all those things are true and there's some debate, eventually someone will find a chink in that armor. Someone will die. Maybe haven't been used as long as you thought they were used. Maybe they don't always work therapeutically. So then what? Do you go back to prohibition? No, that's why I think you need to emphasize cognitive liberty. You need to emphasize people's right to explore these alternate states of consciousness regardless of whether or not they're therapeutic or safe or traditional or spiritual. The point isn't that it's safe or any of these other things. The point is that if you want to live in a free society, you have to be allowed to take a certain amount of risk.
Yeah, that's a big point. That's a very big point. And I think it fits well with your description of the things that people are allowed to do that are legal, that are very dangerous, like race car driving, bungee jumping, all these things that we just allow them to do. We don't think twice about it. Using a parachute, all that crazy shit. We just openly, and nobody's saying, hey, we should ban skydiving. There's no one saying that. But fucking a lot of people die skydiving, man. I mean, it's a fucking dangerous pursuit. We don't seem to care. We seem to care about drugs because we think that somehow or another either our children or someone we know is going to be insidiously infected with these things. They're going to get into their lives and fuck them up. You know, and I think the real problem with that is education. That's the real problem with that. I was extremely fortunate in a weird way to see someone with a cocaine addiction when I was in high school. There's a good friend's cousin who got really fucked up on cocaine when he was a couple years older than me. And I watched his life fall apart. And I remember thinking when I was little, like, wow, I don't want to touch that shit. Like, cocaine's fucking terrible. And then, from then on, I've never done cocaine. But it's because of that education. And I think real education it's a fucking tough thing because you don't really just get it from knowing information. You have to see things. You have to talk to people. You have to experience things on your own. If someone talks about psychedelics, someone teaches about psychedelics, but they have no experience in actual psychedelic states personally, it's a very hollow conversation. It's like a certain amount of education has to be from real life experience.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And the other thing is just, again, this idea of pharmacological determinism. Like, I had a friend that was very, very, very seriously addicted to cocaine and had the resources to do immense quantities every single day. And he'd always say, well, you know, if I try heroin, I know it's all over for me. I know that will be the last straw, so I'm never touching that stuff. And he didn't. But my own perspective, you know, I've essentially tried everything. And if you really just think about these things, you can actually learn. For example, I've tried heroin once. I didn't think it was that interesting.
Did you do it injecting?
No.
You snorted it?
I snorted it, yeah.
Yeah, what was it like?
It was boring, I think.
Boring?
Yeah. I don't think opiates are very interesting drugs psychologically. You know, if I were to be totally honest, I think the cannabis is more euphoric and has so few side effects. You know, opioids cause horrible constipation. They cause all kinds of weird sweating problems. I don't think they're especially pleasant drugs, but they're romanticized so much in our culture that people think that's it. Heroin, the ultimate high. Well, maybe it isn't. Maybe it's not even that great at all. Maybe it's garbage, and it doesn't even matter. And that's the same way I feel about snorted cocaine. I don't even think it's a good drug. It's not an issue of it's so addictive you've got to stay away from it because it's so damn good. It's not good. It's not even an enjoyable high. It has short duration. You then feel bad almost immediately afterwards. It's a flawed substance. Same is true of alcohol, I think, as well. Alcohol is a crazily flawed molecule. It's terrible. No other drug that I can think of causes a hangover of that type, where there's a toxic metabolite that poisons you the following day.
Dr. Carl Hart was trying to explain to me what that is, and essentially he was saying that when you're getting a hangover, it's your body reacting to the addictive properties of alcohol. That you're getting addicted to alcohol almost immediately. That your body is compensating for that, and then this hangover is not just you being dehydrated; it's also your body withdrawing from alcohol.
I am not familiar with any evidence for that.
Do you know who he is, Dr.
Of course,
Carl
yeah.
Hart?
Actually, I tried to intern
Brilliant.
for him when I first moved to New York.
Love that guy.
Yeah, I have a lot of respect for him. But I mean, I'd have to look at his source for that.
You'd have to also look at the way I described it, because I probably butchered it.
Okay, but there's an alternate explanation that's even simpler, which is simply that alcohol is metabolized into a chemical acetaldehyde that's toxic. So, and with alcohol, it's a very, very weak drug by weight. You're consuming insane amounts in terms of the number of molecules. You're consuming insane quantities of the drug. So all of this acetaldehyde accumulates in your body, and it has a directly toxic effect.
Is there a way to counteract that and mitigate the effects?
Yes, there are proposed ways to do it. I haven't experimented with any of them myself because I don't really like alcohol that much to begin with.
Isn't glutathione, that's something that allows your body to process it more easily?
It would have to be something that prevents this specific conversion. I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay. What about crocodile? You ever fuck with that stuff?
Well, this is another perfect example. So you take a drug like crocodile, and it sounds horrible.
It's the internet's drug.
Yeah,
fear drug.
Yeah, people are. But behind every scare story, there's nothing.
Explain what that is.
Okay, so there's a scare story that I believe it was in Moscow, somewhere in Russia, and this was hitting the news around 2004. No, much later, 2010, something like that. I don't know, and the idea was that this is the worst stuff. It's ultra addictive. You inject it, and then you lose a limb, and you have profound necrosis all around the injection site, and this is the worst drug, most addictive drug of all time. Well, the drug itself is called desomorphine, and it's been used medicinally. There's nothing especially addictive or dangerous at all about desomorphine. The problem is that people were injecting completely impure reaction mixtures that had all of the components from the synthesis that hadn't been removed, including phosphorus, which is immensely toxic. So you have people basically reporting on IV phosphorus toxicity as if it were a result of this drug, when it's a completely separate issue. And this is what you see when you look at all of these things. It's never the drug. Any drug scare story, it's never the drug. You always have to look for the root cause, because it's never the drug. There's never been a drug in history. And that is why, if you look at the DEA's list of controlled substances, it's not dangerous drugs that are controlled. It's enjoyable drugs. Something like tetrodotoxin, the chemical in pufferfish, that's not a controlled substance. There's some regulations in terms of how much you can purchase, but it's not a controlled substance. Sigutoxin, the most potent known neurotoxin, it's not a controlled substance. Lead isn't a controlled substance. Mercury isn't a controlled substance. mercuric chloride isn't a controlled substance. All of the deadly poisons, cyanide isn't a controlled substance. It's not about what's safe and what's dangerous. It's about what people like to use, what's enjoyable.
What is the root of that?
I think it's, a puritanical idea that any sort of euphoria is bad. I mean, euphoria is listed as a side effect in some medications. We assume that it's a bad thing to
right
feel
there with
good.
diarrhea. Yeah, it's like euphoria, diarrhea. Yeah, that is a strange thing. Like it's gonna cut back productivity and make you a lazy ne'er-do-well and just become a burden on society. That's a common way of describing people who use drugs.
Sure, and this fundamental idea that sobriety is good.
Yes.
You look on Instagram, people post a selfie and say, 6 months sober, guys, thank you so much, and tons of congratulations, because it's a virtue, because you accomplished something, you're not using drugs.
Yeah.
Whereas in other cultures, that would not be the case. People would just say, oh, you've decided not to work with a certain medicine. That's an interesting choice, not an accomplishment necessarily.
Who was it saying? Was it Kyle Kingsbury that was saying that how much he hates the term plant medicine, or was it Dennis? I think it was Kyle. You don't like the term plant medicine, do you?
I don't. Do you buy?
It's a weird sort of pretentious.
Yes, I know. Well, people call ayahuasca the medicine or things like that. Yeah, or toad medicine. I mean, I wouldn't.
You don't hate it.
A lot of these like more flowery terms like entheogen, I just don't use them myself, but I don't hate it.
Well, I think people like you are very important, and I'm a big fan. But I think one of the reasons why you're important is you are a cognoscente of real drugs. Like you understand what they actually do. You could explain them to the layman, or you could debate them with someone who was a doctor, perhaps, that wanted to talk about the dangers of them. And you understand all the various aspects of it. And I think there's a tremendous amount of ignorance when it comes to drugs, drug consumption. What is a drug? I mean, how many times have you seen a person with a beer in their hand smoking a cigarette saying they don't do drugs? It is so fucking stupid, but it's so common. There's this very, very, very common aspect of being a person, which is this desire to change your mental state. And we've done it throughout history with various substances. But there's so much stigma attached to it. And one of the things I've been doing lately on stage, I'll ask people, how many people get piss tested at work? It's fucking stunning. It's stunning. It's like more than 10% of the audience will raise their hand. Like 1 out of 10 people gets their body tested to make sure that while they're not working there, they're not putting anything in their body that's prohibited.
Which is such a horrible invasion of privacy that, it became so popular that in the 80s, during one presidential election, all the candidates voluntarily had their urine tested to prove that they were sober. I mean, this is like truly considered a virtue. And it's immensely invasive. I say this as someone who's analyzed my own urine in a laboratory before, and it's like a strange portal into your own life that you're showing to a stranger. Everything that you consumed is then apparent there.
Yeah.
And it's a huge invasion of privacy that we've just decided is acceptable, and you have to be very careful about these things.
Yeah. No, I agree.
And, of course, the synthetic cannabinoid epidemic, if you want to call it that. I actually don't want to call it that because I hate even the idea of a drug epidemic, but the popularity of synthetic cannabinoids is largely driven by the fact that they didn't show up on these urine tests. So initially it was in the military, then it was people who were on parole or probation, people who were living hard lives, wanted to get high, couldn't get high. This was a way that they could do it. And so they incentivized people that just wanted to smoke weed using completely untested synthetic cannabinoids instead as a direct result of these urine tests.
Well, it's also just a complete misunderstanding when it comes to the actual effects and how long they last. You're not even testing a person's conscious state. You're testing whether or not a person has altered their state of consciousness outside of their working time. It's not like you show up and they could scan your hand and realize that you're high on marijuana right now. It's not what they're doing. What they're doing is they're testing you for something that could linger in your body for weeks after these psychoactive effects have long since gone.
Oh yeah, or even be the result of passive exposure. There was a great scientific article that came out a couple of years ago where they found that just passive exposure to cannabis smoke contaminates your hair with THC, so that all these people who had hair tests who actually had not smoked cannabis, but it sounds like an excuse. I was just in the room, someone else was doing it. Just being in contact with someone who'd smoked cannabis could then deposit THC in your hair and cause you to test positive. So these tests aren't even necessarily reliable. This is the same problem. There was a kind of trend a little while ago, I don't know if you saw about this, where people would get their urine tested for to quantify the levels of neurotransmitter metabolites in their urine, and this was supposed to be like a fingerprint of your mood. So they'd quantify the level of serotonin, dopamine, GABA, whatever, and then they'd say, oh, you're a little low on serotonin, you're pretty depressed, actually, you need to supplement with some 5-HTP or something like that. It's a very reductive way of thinking about consciousness. But the main issue is that you're not testing in your brain, you're testing your urine, and a lot of these neurotransmitters are biosynthesized in the periphery. So just because you have these neurotransmitters in your urine doesn't mean they were ever in your brain. It doesn't say anything about anything.
So it's so juvenile in a way. It's just it's such a piss poor way of maintaining order, checking people's consciousness, and what you should do is judge people based on their productivity. If I have some guy and he shows up for work and he kicks ass every day, I'm like, dude, what's your secret? I get high before work. It's great. I feel good, having a good time at work. Zippity doo dah, zippity day. I'm putting everything in order, and it just feels good. Like, keep doing what you're doing. I mean, that's how it should be. We should be judged based on whether or not whatever we're doing is. I guess the real caveat to that would be people that do speed.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, you get pretty productive for a short period of time doing speed, but I think the downside of that, there's so many people that are on Adderall today, right?
Oh, yeah.
What are your feelings on that?
I think that it's a very interesting issue because it's amazing when you look at the history of all these things, how these issues repeat themselves over and over and over again. So it was a problem in the 50s, and it's a problem in the 60s, and it's a problem in the 70s. Now it's a problem now. It's always a problem that we're treating as if it were a new thing. But people have been using amphetamine-type stimulants for the better part of 100 years. And people will now, the kind of popular thing to say is, didn't you know Adderall is one carbon atom away from meth? But here's the flip side. Meth is one carbon away from Adderall. So this whole idea that meth, again, back to pharmacological determinism, that meth is a drug that turns you into a toothless, insane, white trash guy who's stabbing the walls with a cleaver looking for people that are hiding and whispering secret messages or something like that. Like, this is just a stereotype that we have created. Of course, there are people like that, but the reality is that these stimulants have an ambiguous potential for all sorts of things. Some people use low doses of methamphetamine. In fact, methamphetamine is Schedule II because to this day it can be and is prescribed as a treatment for ADHD, in addition to amphetamine, which is Adderall.
What do they call it when they prescribe it?
Desoxyn is the brand name for methamphetamine, and Adderall is the brand name for amphetamine. And I've tried both drugs, both amphetamine and methamphetamine, and they're very, very similar drugs. And that's not to say that either are good or bad. It's just a factual statement that if in a double-blind, placebo-controlled, or not even placebo-controlled, just a double-blind trial, I don't think that I could.
It could treat ADHD. It could also help obese patients lose weight. Yeah. Did you know that there's a lot of people that think Trump is on diet pills?
Oh yeah, on a diethylpropion.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, and that he used to be on one of the elements of
fenfluramine, maybe.
Yeah.
Phentermine?
Well, there was some journalist that even talked about that. We saved this. We have it on a folder now. What do you say, Jamie?
I've been hit up messages about that journalist that he might be compromised or sketchy or something like that.
Yeah.
But even if you were on diethylpropion or fenfluramine or phentermine or phenmetrazine or any of these substances, so what?
The question is his judgment compromised because he's hopped up on speed?
His judgment seems compromised regardless.
But is that why?
No, probably not.
But it could be why he gets so much shit done. I mean, remember when during you just don't want to compliment him, and I understand that.
No, that's not why. It's this idea there's a certain exculpatory value that drugs have. People make the same arguments about Hitler. Like Hitler, he was just high on speed. That explains it. The Nazis, they were just high on speed. That explains it. But what value does it really have? Same thing with Anthony Bourdain. They'll say, oh, no drugs were found in his system post-mortem. So what? What if they had been? Then what?
Well, the idea is that he might have been experiencing a fucked up state of mind because of some drug that made him make a poor choice and take his own life.
But you wouldn't know.
You wouldn't know why he did it. Is that what you're saying?
It wouldn't explain anything, really, because you still wouldn't know his internal state. It would just be you're projecting an assumption. So what if there were a small amount of heroin in his blood at the time of his death? Then you would assume that he had relapsed, was so ashamed of his relapse that he then decided to kill himself. But the reality is, we can't make those sorts of assessments. We don't know other people's internal states. We don't even know what these things do to other people.
We don't, but we do know that some things like Abilify and some other SSRIs and even some anti-anxiety medication have been strongly linked to suicidal thoughts. In fact, they're actually listed as some side effects for a lot of these drugs, right?
Yes.
Don't you think that, I mean, I know correlation does not equal causation, but don't you think that that's worth considering and that's something to be discussed?
It's worth considering, but I would be careful about assigning too much value to it, which is what people tend to do. The same thing with Columbine. They'll say, oh, he was on this or that antidepressant. That's why. Is it why? Does it really explain it? Because there's a hell of a lot of people that take those same drugs and don't kill all of their classmates.
Right. For sure. But it also could be a factor. And this is not something that I think we should avoid considering. I think it should be discussed. Yes, I agree with you. But I think we're trying to look at things binary, right? We're looking at things in terms of like on or off, black or white, 1 or 0. And I just don't think drugs work that way.
No.
And I think you agree, yeah. The speed thing is curious to me because one of the side effects of these drugs is impulsive, irrational behavior and extreme confidence in oneself. Like this is right. This is what we always think of people that are hopped up on speed. People that have coke confidence. You know, coke confidence is a real phenomenon. When people do cocaine, they feel very confident about themselves, and they say ridiculous shit to people. So the question is that really what's happening? If I gave coke to you, would you start acting irrationally and feeling extremely confident in yourself, or is it just accentuating a problem that already exists in the person's personality?
Both, probably.
Yeah.
A combination of the two. But the other thing is, even if he has been using this stuff for decades, he's probably tolerant to it, and it's not, I don't think it would explain his behavior.
Well, I think it's giving him energy.
He's been like this for so long,
Yeah.
though. This is a long history of this sort of behavior.
Well, this was what the journalist had talked about, that he had been on this stuff for a long time, and that there was a actual Duane Reade pharmacy in New York where he described where he got the prescription filled.
People were doing the same thing with this finasteride as well, though, and I found that particularly obnoxious.
Finasteride is
Propecia. So they were saying, oh, he's on finasteride, and that explains, his affair, or that explains this because it does this or that to your libido. And again, it's like, I don't know, or not at all, or let's give him some credit for being a human being with free will that makes choices on his own that aren't entirely mediated by what pharmaceuticals he uses.
Well, finasteride also has side effects of depression, and we went over this yesterday with my friend Ari, who was really depressed at one point in time, and it coincided with his use of finasteride.
Right. Yeah, I've seen, but it's not very common. It does occur, but it's not common.
Right, but for the person that does get those side effects, saying that it's not common doesn't really offer any comfort.
No,
it doesn't. Like, oh, well, I'm one of the lucky ones. I'm one of the lucky ones to jump off a bridge to get my hair to grow back.
But, the reason that I'm so opinionated about this particular issue is because you see it time and time again. It never stops. I don't know if you're familiar with the Jeffrey McDonald murder case.
No, I'm not.
Super fascinating. You probably have read about it and forgotten about it. It was a big thing in maybe 1970, but he was this military doctor who's credentialed, the perfect man, did everything right, perfect family, everything beautiful, and then one night he goes to sleep and claims that is right after the Manson murders, claims that these hippies walk into the house saying, kill the pigs, acid is groovy, kill the pigs, acid is groovy, and then just brutally massacre his entire family. And
out of nowhere.
Out of nowhere, yes. And it's a long and complicated story, but he went to prison. I don't think that he is guilty, but people had to find an explanation for why.
What do you mean you don't think he's guilty?
I don't think he's guilty. He had no motive, and the investigation was botched. And
so you think someone came into his house and did that?
Yes.
And he was accused of it? Oh.
Yes. But because he had no motive, people had to construct a motive. They had to concoct a reason that this doctor would have murdered his entire family. And so what's a good reason? Oh, amphetamine. He'd been using this amphetamine-containing diet pill, so that explains it all, right? But it doesn't. It's a terrible explanation. People use amphetamine all the time without killing their family. So I just want to be very careful about, do these things play a role in human behavior? Of course they do. But do they determine human behavior? No.
That's a very good point. There's a lot of factors. It's messy. Being a person is messy.
It's very complicated.
I mean, you're a different person at noon than you are at 7 p.m.
Of course.
Yeah. I mean, it's so complicated. And the more limitations we put on research and the more stigma we put on the use of these things, the more murky these waters are going to be.
Yeah. And I think people don't even appreciate the extent to which all these drugs have been made illegal. Of course, everyone's aware cannabis is Schedule I, LSD, psilocybin, MDMA. But the list is long. It's hundreds and hundreds of chemicals. And a lot of these chemicals are chemicals with no supporters. No one's fighting for them. There's a substance called 2CN, one of Shulgin's creations. They just threw it in Schedule I. No one uses it. If you scour the internet, I'd be surprised if you could find 3 reports of people using 2CN. Totally unheard of. But they just throw it in Schedule I because why the hell not? No one's going to stand up for it. That's the end of 2CN.
But they missed a lot of shit too, right? Like they missed 5-methoxydimethyltryptamine. They missed that.
No, that was made illegal in 2011.
Right, but for 1970, when everything else got thrown into the mix, they made it illegal. I bought that shit. I used to be able to buy it online.
Yeah, so did I.
Yeah, it was crazy. You could buy a fucking jug of it, then get the whole city high. You could buy it online.
Yeah, because it was never popular.
So how did they make it illegal? How do they do that?
They don't need any reason. They can simply say that it has abuse potential and make it illegal, and if no one opposes it, then it becomes illegal. That's how this list has gotten so long. You have all these people fighting for the legality of cannabis and these other substances that are known to have therapeutic potential, but these other more obscure substances that are really only of concern to scientists who are very seriously disinclined to break the law for the sake of their research. Drug users don't care about breaking the law. Scientists are very unlikely because the whole purpose of science is to publish. And you can't publish if you committed a crime in the context of your research. So scientists are dramatically limited by the prohibition of these substances. And it's the obscure ones that end up actually making a big difference, not so much clinically, but in terms of actually understanding the mechanism of these substances, the structure-activity relationships, the neuropharmacology.
Yeah, the stigma on psychedelic use and even studying them has led so many doctors or scientists, researchers that would be inclined to want to do research on these particular things. They avoid them because it could be incredibly damaging to their careers.
And it's bureaucratic. I mean, there was a group at Columbia that was doing really fascinating research on the drug Ibogaine and Parkinson's disease. And I was speaking with the head of this study, and he was saying how obnoxious it was to have the government come and weigh his vial of Ibogaine every day and monitor his logs. And, this guy is a really serious researcher. He's not going to, if he were to get high, he's not going to get high off this tiny supply of government-mandated or government-sanctioned Ibogaine that was supplied to him. But they give these people a really hard time. They make them buy a very expensive safe. They do all this stuff that these are the last people to have used the substances. And they are the ones that are hurt the most severely, except for, of course, the people that go to prison. They're the ones that are hurt the most severely.
Yeah, it's a crazy thing to think that people are going to recreationally use Ibogaine. I mean, that's one of the weirder ones.
Oh, it's totally bizarre. Yeah, and Ibogaine is a drug with so much potential. For those people that are aware of Ibogaine, it's typically only discussed as a drug that treats addiction to opioids, which is very, very important, especially now. But that's the tip of the iceberg with Ibogaine. It has one of the most complex pharmacologies of any drug I've ever studied. There's almost nothing it does not do. I mean, it's, you have the alpha-3 beta-4 nicotinic acetylcholine receptor, which is also the target of Wellbutrin and has a kind of smoking cessation, anti-addictive effect. Then you have really high affinity relative to the other receptors for the NMDA receptor, so it has a ketamine type effect, and has a classical psychedelic effect at the 5-HT2A receptor. And it's a dopamine reuptake inhibitor, serotonin reuptake inhibitor. It just goes on, and then it releases this protein, GDNF, which is considered one of the most important proteins in treatment of Parkinson's disease. It's one of the only things that is able to cause regrowth of dopaminergic neurons in people that have Parkinson's. So this is like really fascinating stuff that's just in Schedule 1. Scientists can't work with it. It's a tragedy.
It is a tragedy. And it's also so effective. I know so many people that have gone to Mexico and gone to these clinics and done one Ibogaine session for 24 hours and come out of it a totally different person. Come out of it with a complete new perspective on even why they were using whatever they were using in the first place, in a way that they didn't. Not only does it help eliminate the addictive properties and the connection that your body has to those substances, but it also allows you to re-examine why you went down that road in the first place.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And there was a sort of pharmaceutical push to develop non-psychedelic derivatives of Ibogaine that would retain the anti-addictive properties, which sounds like a good idea in theory. But so they created this drug called 18-MC, and it wasn't psychedelic, but then it also lacked some of these neurotrophic factor releasing properties of Ibogaine. But really the bottom line is that we shouldn't deny the fact that the psychedelic activity of these substances is therapeutic, psychotherapeutic in and of itself. I had a friend who was severely, severely addicted to heroin, and he traveled to the Netherlands to take Ibogaine and, took the drug, was going into the experience, and then started feeling this intense craving for heroin, and started looking through his bags to see if he somehow had forgotten about a little bit of heroin that could just get him through the day. And then he goes into his bag and then finds a small bag of heroin and snorts it, and then it's like, I traveled all the way to the Netherlands to do this. I'm a failure. I'm relapsing after all this money, all this work. I have no self-control. I'm a terrible, terrible person. Why can't I just stop? And then realize that the whole thing was a hallucination. There was no heroin. He'd hallucinated his own relapse.
Whoa. Wow. What was your experience with Ibogaine?
I've never taken high doses. The most I've ever taken is 50 milligrams of
What's an effective dose?
It really depends. There's a sort of move toward microdosing Ibogaine because it actually does have a cardiotoxic effect, especially at higher doses. So people are looking into ways of reducing that cardiotoxicity by using it at lower doses for longer periods of time. Again, this is something that has to do with prohibition, because in this prohibition market, if you are addicted to heroin, you go to Mexico or you go to Canada and you go to an Ibogaine clinic, you need to get as much bang for your buck as quickly as possible. You're not going to stay there for 2 months of treatment because most people have lives and can't afford to do that. So what do? They give you what is called a flood dose. It's a massive dose, often a multi-gram dose of Ibogaine, because it's just like a sledgehammer that knocks you down and allows you to get out of it. But is that the best way? That's the fastest way. That's the most appetizing way for someone that had to travel to do it. But is it the best? Probably not, because we know that at high doses it has this potential to induce cardiac arrhythmias, and that can kill and has killed. So people are now looking at lower doses over longer periods of time, which would be ideal if it were legal in the United States, I believe.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one to me. It's a really interesting one because it's got such a long history of use, and so many people have had these very good experiences with getting off of addictive drugs from it.
Oh yeah.
And it's so relatively unknown as well. It's something that, I've talked to someone like you, and of course you know about it, but I bet if we walked down the street and asked 100 people, I'd be shocked if one of them knew about it.
Yeah. And Terence McKenna would sometimes talk about psilocybin as an invention of mushrooms, or as technology, or as being synthetic. And I don't really agree with that idea. But
an invention of mushrooms?
Or he would sort of say, like, this is as synthetic as a Coca-Cola bottle. This is like alien technology. That's how he would describe psilocybin. But in my opinion, it's a pretty simple derivative of tryptophan. You just decarboxylate methylate the nitrogen twice and then have this phosphate ester. But ibogaine, that's a crazy molecule. That's like a three-dimensional thing that no medicinal chemist would have ever discovered. That, if this, not to sound mystical, but that strikes me as some sort of plant technology. I mean, it's an amazingly complicated structure. It's so complicated that it's almost impossible to synthesize. In fact, it can't be synthesized commercially. All the ibogaine that people use has to be extracted from plants because that's the only way to get it.
I first found out about it when Hunter S. Thompson accused Ed Muskie of being on it during the presidential race of, what was it, 1970 or whatever it was. That was a hilarious moment, and a lot of people, I think, were introduced to what ibogaine was by that, when he said a Brazilian witch doctor had been flown in. Yeah.
Of course, it doesn't even grow in Brazil.
No, it doesn't even make sense. Well, it was hilarious when he was on the Dick Cavett show and they asked him about spreading those rumors, and he's like, well, there was a rumor that he was doing this ibogaine, and I know because I started the rumor. I just reported factually. There was a rumor. Yeah, I mean, it's there's a lot of these drugs that get put into various categories, and ibogaine is one of the very few that really isn't in any category in terms of like modern culture, like the way we discuss and consider these things.
Oh, because it's very different structurally and pharmacologically. But that Hunter S. Thompson story is really interesting because it's obviously a very charming, funny story, and I'd have to know exactly what had happened relative to the scheduling of ibogaine. But that might be an example of how what's a frivolous joke that most people enjoy, told in the wrong climate, can result in the loss of a chemical that could save tens of thousands of lives and could be a treatment for Parkinson's disease. This is the responsibility that journalists have. It's more responsibility than I think they'd like to have often, but that's the truth. You make a joke about ibogaine, next thing you know, it's in Schedule 1. Maybe you made the joke afterwards, but if you didn't, you have to wonder, because that was one of the first major mentions of ibogaine in the popular press. And the same is true of, there was a Rolling Stone scare article that came out a while ago, and it's the same deal, this drug 2-CT7, and they do a whole story, oh, this teenager, he took too much, and this 2-CT7, it can kill you with just a, little pile of powder or whatever. And then the drug is made Schedule 1. Shulgin worked on psychedelics. Alexander Shulgin, the great medicinal chemist who spent his entire life studying psychedelics, considered this one of the 6 greatest creations of his entire career. Squashed by a single stupid story in Rolling Stone. That's how easily it happens.
Now, was the story stupid? I mean, did it have any basis in fact?
An editor at Rolling Stone told me that there were factual errors in it, and there's something weird about it. But yes, people did die. Because yes, people die from using drugs occasionally. To deny that would be to lie. But that doesn't mean that they don't have therapeutic activity, and it doesn't mean that they should be illegal.
One of the ones that disturbs me the most is fentanyl. Fentanyl, I don't even understand why anybody would want to make that. It seems to me that we have plenty of opiates as it is. Why make one that's 1,000 times stronger than heroin?
Yeah. I've known 4 fentanyl chemists, including the one that introduced fentanyl to the United States initially. He died recently.
Did he die from it?
No. Died of old age.
It's killed so many people.
Yeah.
Tom Petty, Dave.
And this conversation is only halfway through. It's a 2-hour and 53-minute talk, so basically 3 hours, and we only made it through an hour and 28 minutes of it. So if you guys want to finish this is the Joe Rogan Experience number 1136 with Hamilton Morris, talking about different drugs and why they are illegal. I'm about to shut the stream down for a minute. I'm hungry. I'm about to go grab something to eat. Alright, so turn the speaker off. Turn the AC off. When I come back in here next time, I'll continue to work on the lips and the chin. Come on, camera. Yes, I'll get try to get more details in the lip and smooth out this area of her chin directly below her lip and blend those colors in some more. But it's really looking good now. Like I said, this is getting down to the final layers of paint, and so you can see the richness in the skin tone. Work on her face for another hour or so, and that should be it. That's the only part of her skin you can see is her face, so I'll almost basically be done with all those colors as soon as I get finished with her face. Like I said, maybe an hour or so, a little bit longer, just to finish out the lips and the chin. I may lighten her jawline up a little bit. The ear looks good, the eyes look good. And then after that, it'll just be the articles of clothing, adding some highlights to the collar, to these middle plates on her shoulder, and her bow tie has a lot of highlights that need to go in there. But it's getting there. It's almost there, guys. Almost finished with another one. Yeah, like I said, I'm hungry as hell. I'm about to go get me something to eat and play some. I've been playing lately. Damn, every time I try to think of that game, I can't think of that shit. Watch Dogs Part 2. I had that shit since it came out and just never played it like years ago, so I figured I might as well get my money out that shit and go ahead and play that game. So I've been playing that for a couple days. So I'm about to go eat some late lunch or early dinner or whatever and get on the game for a minute. I'll probably stream my gameplay if you guys want to check that out. And there is a really good chance that I'll be back in here this evening to work on this piece some more. So either way, I'll catch you guys around later on. You're awesome. Appreciate everybody stopping in the stream, hanging with me for a little while, and checking out the progress on this portrait. Peace. Until next time.